The road cut through the desert like an ancient scar. No light, only the black asphalt fading into the horizon and the cold wind carrying dry dust. The sound of a lone engine echoed in the distance, deep, steady, unhurried. An old pickup truck, its paint faded, slowly drove along the empty road. Inside, an older man kept his eyes fixed ahead, hands firmly on the steering wheel, controlled breathing. No radio, only the rumble of the engine and the wind hitting the bodywork. He was returning from an appointment. Familiar route, quiet routine. But something changed. 2 headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Fast, aggressive, very close. The man adjusted his mirror. He didn't accelerate. He didn't swerve. He just watched. The black car overtook violently and braked sharply ahead, forcing the pickup truck onto the shoulder. Dust rose in thick clouds. The pickup truck's engine died in sudden silence. 2 doors opened at once. 2 men came down quickly, hooded, hands in their sweatshirt pockets, nervous. The taller one gestured excessively. The shorter one looked around tensely, as if still hesitating. The man in the pickup truck didn't move. He just took a deep, slow breath and calmly opened the door. He stepped onto the ground. Big, heavy, silent. The cold wind hit his face. He closed the door slowly, without looking directly at the 2 men approaching. The leader stepped forward first, pushing the older man's chest with unnecessary force. Wallet. Cell phone. Now. The voice came out too loud. Compensation. Fear disguised as authority. The older man didn't even flinch from the shove, his eyes fixed on the aggressor's face for 2 seconds, not with anger, but with something worse. Silent assessment, like someone studying a mistake about to be completed. The accomplice instinctively took a step back. The leader noticed and compensated with more aggression. "Are you deaf, old man?" He pointed to something under his shirt. It could be a weapon. It could be a bluff. The older man took a deep breath. He didn't answer. He simply raised his hands slowly, palms open, as if accepting the situation, but his eyes remained fixed, gauging distance, weight, intention. The wind blew between the 3 men, and in that heavy silence, something invisible shifted in the air. The accomplice sensed it first. That man wasn't afraid. I was waiting. The leader stepped forward, encroaching on the older man's personal space. I said, "Wallet and cell phone." Now. The voice tried to sound firm, but it came out too fast. Poorly disguised anxiety. The older man kept his hands raised, palms open. He didn't retreat. He didn't advance. He simply stood there, solid as a rock, breathing with the same controlled rhythm as always. His eyes scanned the attacker's face, not with defiance, but with a precise reading. Tense jaw, dilated pupils, shoulders too rigid. Someone trying to look dangerous. Someone who never needed to be. The accomplice shifted his weight from one foot to the other, staring at the empty road. No cars, no witnesses, just the wind carrying dust and the distant sound of something that might be an engine too far away to matter. "You have 5 seconds, the leader growled, shoving another punch into the man's chest. This time, the hand remained there, pressing down. An attempt at physical domination. To break the irritating calm that emanated from that silence, the older man lowered his hand slowly. Very slowly. He reached into his back pocket with deliberate, visible, unhurried movements. He took out his wallet, worn leather, thin, old. He extended it to the leader with a firm hand. "Here." One word. "Serious." Without emotion. The leader snatched the wallet from his hand and opened it with nervous fingers. A few crumpled dollars. A credit card. Nothing else. "Is that all?" The voice rose an octave. Frustration. "Where's the cell phone?" The man pointed inside the pickup truck, to the cup holder next to the gear shift. The accomplice approached hesitantly, opened the passenger door, and picked up the device, a simple, old model without a case. While the accomplice held the cell phone, their eyes met those of the older man. It was quick, less than 2 seconds. But something came through in that look. Not threat, not despair. Something worse. A quiet certainty. Like someone who has seen this happen before. like someone who already knows how it ends. The accomplice swallowed hard and looked away first. The leader noticed his partner's hesitation and reacted more aggressively. He takes off his jacket. I bet there's more to it. The older man didn't argue. He calmly took off his leather jacket, folded it once, and spread it out. The leader threw his jacket on the ground and stomped on it. Now lie down on the floor, face down. Break. The wind blew strongly. The older man looked at the dirt and pebbles on the ground. Then he looked back at the leader, and for the first time, something changed in his expression. Not fear, but complete assessment. He knelt down slowly. She placed her hands on the cold floor, and as he lowered his body, his eyes remained fixed on the two men above him. The accomplice instinctively took a step back, because that man on the ground didn't seem defeated. He seemed restrained, and being contained is much more dangerous. The older man remained lying face down on the cold ground. Small stones pressed against his face. Dust entered through his controlled breathing. The cold wind cut through the exposed skin of his neck. He didn't move. The leader walked around him in slow circles, kicking loose dirt toward the outstretched body. An attempt at humiliation, to make his power last longer. "Look at this." The voice came out drawn out, theatrical. "I bet you think you're all that, huh? Big pickup truck, leather jacket." He kicked the jacket that was lying on the ground. But in the end, there he is, on the ground, like everyone else. The accomplice stood 3 meters away, holding his cell phone and wallet. His eyes didn't stop. Empty road, man on the ground, partner circling, growing unease. Something wasn't right. The leader crouched beside the fallen man, bringing his face close to his. "Say something, old man. Beg, cry, do something." Silence. Only the controlled breathing of the man on the ground. Slow, deep, steady, like someone meditating, like someone waiting. The leader felt anger rising, anger at the calm, anger at the silence that wouldn't be broken. He reached out and slammed the man's head against the ground with unnecessary force. "I told you to speak." The voice echoed on the empty road, and then, for the first time, the older man spoke. "Are you sure about what you're doing?" 6 words. Serious. No rush, no fear. The leader froze for half a second, because it wasn't the phrase that mattered, it was the tone. There was no pleading, there was no despair. There was something worse, a genuine question, like a teacher giving one last chance before the inevitable consequence. The accomplice felt his stomach clench. "Dude, that's enough," he muttered to his partner. "Grab your things and let's go." The leader stood up quickly, compensating for his discomfort with renewed aggression. "Shut up. I decide when we go." He pulled something from his pocket, a small knife, blade dirty, handle with a cracked plastic. He pointed it at the man on the ground. "Get up." Slowly. The older man placed his palms on the ground and rose to his feet with controlled movements. First his knees, then his torso, finally standing. Dust dripped from his shoulders and arms. His face was marked by small stones, but his eyes remained exactly the same. Calm, measuring, waiting. The leader pointed the knife at his chest. "Take off your shirt. I want to see if you're wearing a chain, a watch, anything you're hiding." Long pause. The wind blew between the 3 men. And in that instant, something invisible shifted in the balance of the scene. The older man looked at the knife. Then he looked at the leader's face, and her lips moved almost imperceptibly, not in words, but in something that seemed like a stifled sigh, like someone who has just made a decision. The accomplice saw the change first, and his whole body screamed a silent warning, "Corre." The older man didn't take off his shirt. He stood still, staring at the knife pointed at his chest. The blade trembled slightly in the leader's hand, not from strength, but from poorly controlled nerves. 3 seconds of silence. 4, 5. The leader took a half step forward. "I ordered it to be removed." "No." 1 word. Firm. Final. The air froze. The accomplice instinctively took 2 steps back. His fingers gripped the stolen cell phone until his knuckles turned white. "What?" The leader blinked. confused. The knife lowered 5 centimeters. "I said no," the older man repeated, and this time his voice carried something new. Not anger, not a threat, just a limit reached. The leader tried to laugh, but the sound came out fake, forced. "Oh yeah. And what are you going to do, old man? Are you going to hit me with that belly?" He poked the man's abdomen with the tip of the knife, lightly, provocatively, testing. The older man lowered his eyes to the blade pressed against his shirt. And then something happened. A memory flashed through his mind like a cold lightning bolt. Another desert, another road, another time, hands tied, knees on the hot ground, someone pointing something far worse than a dirty knife, and the voice of an instructor echoed, "When you have no choice, you create one." His shoulders relaxed, not of defeat, of decision. His hands, which were at his sides, adjusted subtly, weight redistributed. Center of gravity lowered a few centimeters, imperceptible movements for those who didn't know how to read body language. But the accomplice saw and understood before the brain could process it. This man was trained. He dropped his cell phone on the floor. "Dude, stop." The voice came out sharp, almost a scream. "Let's go, now." The leader turned his head. "I told you to shut up." Error. He took his eyes off the target. For 2 seconds, the older man did not attack. It didn't move. He just continued standing there, breathing slowly. But something had definitely changed in his posture, in the way his eyes focused, in the dangerous stillness that emanated from every tense muscle. The leader turned his gaze and felt it. That silence was no longer that of a victim. It was like a predator waiting for the exact moment. The knife trembled more violently in his hand. And for the first time since getting out of the car, he felt something he hadn't expected to feel: fear. The leader took a half-step back, instinct, involuntary, and he realized his mistake instantly. To back down was to admit it. To admit it was to lose control. To lose control was unacceptable. He compensated with multiplied aggression. "Do you think I'm kidding?" The voice came out too shrill, despair disguised as fury. He stepped forward again, pointing the knife at the older man's face. The blade just inches from his nose. "I'm going to cut you. You—" The older man didn't blink. His eyes remained fixed on the blade for a second. Then they slowly moved upwards until they met the attacker's eyes. And there, in that meeting of eyes, the leader saw something that made his stomach churn. Absolute indifference to the threat, like someone who has faced worse things, like someone who has seen bigger knives, like someone who has been through situations where death was more likely than unlikely. The accomplice broke the silence with a trembling voice. "He's not scared, man. Stop it." The leader turned his head violently. "Are you on my side or his? I'm saying we've already got what we came for. Let's go. We'll go out when I decide." He turned back to the older man and, in an impulsive movement, pushed his chest with his free hand, hard, aggressive, trying to provoke a reaction. The man swayed slightly. He didn't fall. He didn't react. He just kept staring. And in that dense silence, the leader felt something worse than fear. He felt ridiculous. The humiliation rose like bile in my throat. Every year being ignored, invisible, considered insignificant, too small, too weak. Nothing special. And now there he was, and with a knife in his hand, with total power over the situation, and yet being treated as irrelevant. Anger exploded. He raised the knife above his head. "Then die." The arm began to descend, and the older man moved. Not fast, not flashy, just efficient. The right hand rose in a precise movement, intercepting the attacker's wrist mid-arc. Fingers like steel gripped the bone. Controlled twist. Exact pressure. The knife fell to the floor with a muffled metallic sound. The leader shouted, not yet in pain, but in surprise. The accomplice froze, feet planted firmly on the ground, unable to decide whether to run or stay. The older man held the attacker's wrist for another 3 seconds. Constant pressure, fixed gaze, controlled breathing. There was no anger on his face. There was no victory, just an old sadness, like someone who was forced to do something they swore they would never do again. He released his wrist. The leader staggered backward, clutching his arm, his eyes wide. And for the first time, he understood. This man was holding back. And now, it wasn't anymore. The atmosphere changed. The tables have turned. The leader staggered 3 steps back, clutching his wrist as if he had been trapped in a vice. His eyes searched for the knife on the floor. Too far away. Out of reach. The older man didn't move forward. He didn't chase. He just stood there, breathing slowly, his hands at his sides. But something fundamental had changed. The stance was no longer that of a victim. It was up to whoever decided what happens next. The accomplice took 2 more steps back, tripped on a stone, and almost fell. His voice came out thin and broken. We didn't know, man. We didn't know who you were." The older man slowly turned his head in his direction. "And does that change anything?" 4 words. Serious, heavy. The accomplice swallowed hard. He didn't answer, because there was no answer that justified it. A distant sound cut through the silence, the engine of a vehicle coming down the road. All 3 looked in the same direction. Lighthouses appeared on the horizon, still far away, but getting closer. The accomplice turned to his partner with desperate urgency. "Someone's coming. We need to leave now." The leader hesitated, his eyes shifting between the older man, the knife on the ground, and the distant headlights. Pride battling against survival instinct. But the vehicle was approaching too fast. "Let's go!" The accomplice was already running towards the black car. The leader gave the older man one last look, trying to find something, anything, that would restore his sense of control. He didn't find it. He only saw calm eyes, steady, eyes that already knew how this would end. He turned and ran. The older man stood still while the 2 hurriedly got into the car. The engine started. Tires skidded on the gravel. The black car accelerated violently, raising a cloud of dust, and disappeared in the opposite direction from the approaching headlights. The vehicle that was coming down the road passed slowly, a white pickup truck, the driver looking curiously at the man alone on the side of the road, at the parked truck, at the jacket thrown on the ground. But it didn't stop. He continued on his way, and silence returned. The older man stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty road where the thief's car had disappeared. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep, slow breath, like someone who has just contained something greater than physical strength. He crouched down and picked up the jacket from the floor. He shook off the dust. He put it on slowly, adjusting the zipper. Then he picked up the abandoned knife. He held it by the blade and walked to the edge of the road. He threw it into the dense bushes. He went back to the pickup truck, opened the door, and sat in the driver's seat. His hands gripped the steering wheel, firmly. But they trembled slightly now, not out of fear, of contained adrenaline, of memories that returned uninvited, of a part of him that needed to awaken, a part he would have preferred to keep asleep. He closed his eyes for 3 seconds. He took a deep breath, and when she opened her eyes again, something had changed in her face. No relief, certainty. Those 2 men didn't know yet, but they just made the most documented mistake of the night. Why did that white pickup truck just drive by? My dash cam was on. The older man started the truck's engine. The deep sound filled the silence of the empty road. He adjusted the rearview mirror, checked the side mirrors, and took a deep breath before engaging the gear. But it hasn't accelerated yet. He sat there, engine running, looking at the road ahead through the dust-covered windshield. His hands still gripped the steering wheel with unnecessary force. White knuckles, tense jaw. Unwanted memories pulsed in my mind, not from those 2 minutes by the roadside, but from years ago. From places where knives were the least of my problems. From decisions that left scars that never show up on x-rays. He let go of the steering wheel and rubbed his face with both hands. Long, slow, like someone trying to clean something invisible. 15 kilometers ahead, the black car sped down the dark road, its engine revving beyond its safe limit. The accomplice held the dashboard with both hands, his eyes fixed on the road. "Slow down, you're going to crash." The leader didn't answer. He just pressed the accelerator harder. Anger, shame, a need for distance. "We messed up, man," the accomplice murmured, his voice trembling. "We messed up big time. Shut up. He wasn't normal." Did you see the way he moved? That was, I told you to shut up. The leader punched the steering wheel, once, twice, 3 times. The car swerved slightly. It corrected. It continued at high speed. A heavy silence filled the interior of the vehicle. Then the accomplice looked at the stolen cell phone, still in his hand. The screen was cracked from when it fell to the ground. We didn't even take anything worthwhile, he whispered. Empty wallet, old cell phone, and we attacked him with a knife. Reality began to weigh on it. If anyone saw, if anyone recorded, the driver slammed on the brakes. The car skidded and came to a stop on the shoulder, kicking up dust. Silence. Only the rapid breathing of the 2 men. Nobody saw anything, the leader said, more to himself than to his partner. There was nobody there, just that pickup truck that drove by. Exactly, the accomplice turned, eyes wide. That pickup truck, if it had a camera, if it recorded our license plate. The leader squinted, his hands trembled on the steering wheel, because he knew his partner was right. And something worse began to form in his mind. Who was that man? Why was he so calm? Why did he move that way? Unanswered questions, and each one carried an increasing weight. We have to get rid of this cell phone, the wallet, everything. The accomplice was almost panicking. Now, before we get home. The leader did not respond. He just glanced in the rearview mirror, as if expecting to see headlights chasing them in the darkness. But the road behind them was empty. For now. Meanwhile, on the side of the road where it all began, the pickup truck finally moved. The older man drove slowly, respecting the speed limit, his eyes fixed ahead. He grabbed the cell phone, not the stolen one, but a second device that was in the glove compartment. He dialed a memory number. 2 taps. A voice answered from the other end. I need a favor, he said, his voice deep and controlled. Something happened. I need you to check the Route 40 eastbound dash cams for the last 30 minutes. Break. No, I'm fine. But there are 2 guys who won't be around anytime soon. He hung up. And for the first time since it all began, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her lips. Not out of joy. Inevitable justice is on the way. 3 days later, the leader was lying on the sofa in a small apartment, curtains drawn, television on at a low volume. I wasn't watching. I just looked at the screen without seeing. The stolen cell phone had been destroyed and thrown into a river, the wallet burned, the clothes from that night buried in an abandoned lot. Everything eliminated, but the feeling wouldn't go away. He could still feel the tightness in that wrist, the incomprehensible strength of those fingers, the gaze that measured, calculated, decided. And worse, the calm, that impossible calm of someone who wasn't afraid because they had already seen worse things. Much worse. The accomplice hadn't shown up since then. He wasn't answering messages. His phone was switched off, a silence that screamed, every man for himself now. The local news broadcast has begun. The leader wasn't paying any attention until he heard a phrase that made his whole body freeze. Attempted robbery recorded by a vehicle camera on Route 40 gained national attention after the victim's identity was revealed. He sat upright on the sofa, his blood running cold. The screen displayed shaky images from a dash cam, 2 hooded men getting out of a black car, an older man being forced to the ground, aggressive gestures, a knife pointed. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was sufficient. Enough to partially see faces, sufficient to identify the car, sufficient to recognize the sequence of events. And then the presenter said something that made the air leave the leader's lungs. The victim of the robbery has been identified as Steven Seagal, actor and martial arts expert. The remote control fell from his hand. The world turned. Steven Seagal. He was no ordinary old man. It was not an easy target. He was someone the whole country knew. Someone whose history included decades of combat training. Someone who had connections, resources, reach. Panic rose like a cold wave. He picked up his cell phone with trembling hands and searched for news online. Dozens of articles, hundreds of shares, thousands of comments. Cowards attack unarmed actor on the road. Police are searching for 2 people accused of attempted robbery and assault. Video shows moment when Seagal disarms attacker. Each headline was a punch to the gut. He clicked on a video on social media, the same recording from the dash cam but enlarged, stabilized, and enhanced. And there, in high definition, he saw it all again. His own arrogance, his own violence, his own downfall. The comments were an avalanche. Who's dumb enough to try and steal Steven Seagal? Don't these guys know who he is? They deserved it. I hope the police catch these cowards soon. He closed the app, but the words continued to echo. Cowards. Burros. They deserved it. The phone rang. Unknown number. He stared at the screen for 5 seconds. He let it ring until it went to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. His hands were shaking so much that he could barely hold the device. He didn't answer. He just sat there, on the sofa, phone vibrating in his hand, staring at the television screen where his own face appeared in a blurry but recognizable image. Police are asking for the public's help in identifying the suspects. The apartment door was unlocked. He had nowhere to run, and for the first time in his life, he understood what that man on the road had felt when he was forced to the ground. Absolute vulnerability. But with one crucial difference, that man was innocent, not him. And the whole world now knew it. 5 days after the video went viral, the accomplice was sitting in his mother's kitchen, a cup of cold coffee between his trembling hands. He hadn't slept properly since that night. Every car sound on the street made his whole body tense. Every knock on the door was the police in his imagination. The mother entered the kitchen, cell phone in hand, worried expression on her face. "Son, did you see that?" She turned the screen towards him, the video, again, shared in a family group. He looked away. "I saw it, Mom." "What cowardice." She shook her head indignantly. 2 men, an elderly man all alone. "I hope they arrest those 2 soon." She didn't know. No one in the family knew, but the weight on his chest increased with each word. "Mom, I need to go out." He stood up too quickly. The chair scraped on the floor. He left before she could ask anything. The leader was in a worse situation. He had locked himself in his apartment ever since the video went viral. Curtains drawn, door double locked, phone on airplane mode. But reality was knocking on the door in other ways. Messages piled up from friends, acquaintances, former colleagues, all sharing the video, all commenting, all without knowing they were talking about him. "Dude, did you see that video? What idiots?" They tried to steal Steven Seagal, man. Imagine how stupid they were. The police should be closing in on those guys by now. He deleted all the messages without replying. There was no possible answer. His face was blurred in the video, but it was recognizable to those who knew him well. The car had already been identified by investigators. Model, color, approximate region. It was only a matter of time. Knocking on the door. He froze on the sofa, his heart racing. 3 blows. Firm. Authoritative. "Police. Open the door." The world stopped. His legs were trembling so much that he could barely stand. He walked to the door as if walking to his own judgment. Sweaty palms, irregular breathing. He looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers, relaxed but alert postures. There was nowhere to run. There were no more useful lies. He unlocked the door slowly. It opened. The police officers looked him up and down, instant recognition. They had seen the video. They knew it was him. "Are you name?" one of the officers asked, his hand resting on his utility belt. He tried to speak. His voice came out hoarse, broken. "We need you to come with us to give a statement about an incident on Route 40 6 days ago." It wasn't a request. It was an order disguised as an invitation. He nodded, unable to do anything else. While one police officer asked him to get his documents, the other spoke on the radio. Confirmed. First suspect located. Following protocol. First suspect. This meant that the accomplice was also being sought or had already been found. They went down the stairs of the building. He was between the 2 police officers. Neighbors watched from the window, some already with their cell phones in hand, recording. The shame burned more intensely than any physical pain. In the car, while being driven along the same road where it all began, he looked out the window. The desert passed by, silent, unchanging. And he remembered the older man's gaze, that gaze that measured, calculated, decided. Now I understood what that look had seen. Not just two thieves, but two lives on the verge of crumbling because of their own choices. The vehicle drove off in silence, and he finally understood the meaning of that impossible calm he had seen by the side of the road. It wasn't indifference. It was certain. I'm certain that justice will always prevail, sometimes through punches, sometimes by law, but it always arrives. And now, it had arrived, 2 weeks later. The video was still circulating, no longer as something new, but as a lesson, shared in safety discussion groups, used in martial arts forums, quoted in conversations about consequences. The story had become crystallized in the collective memory. Two men attacked the wrong person, and they paid the price. Steven Seagal gave a brief, concise, drama-free interview. I wasn't looking for confrontation, I just wanted to go home. But when you take away someone's choice, you force a response, break. And sometimes, the answer isn't what you expected. The words resonated beyond the interview. They became quotes, reflections, silent warnings. First, external micro-turn. The two men were formally charged. Attempted aggravated robbery. Threat with a bladed weapon. Assault. The evidence was irrefutable. The dashcam video. Witnesses who saw the car fleeing. Cell phone records. Enhanced facial recognition. There was no possible defense. The accomplice accepted a deal. Cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He confessed everything. He described the improvised planning, the choice of location, the moment of decision. And he admitted, his voice trembling in a recorded statement, "We didn't want to rob someone famous. We just wanted an easy target, easy target." The words hung in the air in the courtroom. A man in his 60s, driving alone at night in an old pickup truck, in their minds, vulnerable, actually prepared. The judge looked at the two defendants with an expression that mixed disapproval with something close to pity. You chose violence, and violence chose you back. Second, internal micro-turn. The leader did not speak during the trial. Sitting in the defendant's dock, head down, hands handcuffed, he just stared at the floor. But inside, something had definitively broken. It wasn't just prison that awaited him. It was the weight of knowing that the whole world had seen it. Your cowardice, his arrogance, his downfall, and that this image would never be erased. Even after serving his sentence, even after rebuilding his life, that video would exist forever. A permanent record of the worst moment of his existence. He thought of the man who attacked, that calm look, that absolute control, that restrained strength. And finally, he understood. True strength is not about attacking. It's choosing not to attack until there's no other choice. Final moral echo. Months later, in a small gym in Los Angeles, Steven Seagal was adjusting his training gloves. There were no cameras. There were no interviews. Just the sound of the punching bag echoing in the empty space. A young man approached, hesitantly. "Mr. Seagal, may I ask you something?" He stopped, turned around. That night on the road, were you afraid?" Silence. Steven looked at the young man, then at his own hands. Fear. Always. Only idiots aren't afraid. He adjusted his gloves. But fear doesn't determine your actions. You do. The young man nodded slowly, absorbing it. Steven went back to the punching bag. 1 punch, 2, 3, controlled rhythm, measured strength, steady breathing. And in the silence of that gymnasium, the lesson echoed louder than any words. Respect is not something that can be imposed. Get inspired. If this story made you stop and think, if you remembered that choices matter, if it showed you that true strength is silent, leave your comment. Have you ever seen someone mistake silence for weakness? Leave a like if this story affected you in any way, and subscribe to the channel, because there are more stories like this coming. True stories, stories that teach without shouting. Share this video. Someone out there needs to remind us, violence has its price, that arrogance always crumbles, and sometimes The easy target is the one who teaches you the hardest lesson.